Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Oh, sorry, morning. No, it is not morning here. It's actually okay. Good afternoon from here. Almost evening, actually. Yeah. So, how we all doing today? Hope we're doing good. And it's been a little while I've been here, but I figured I have to try to put a video out today. Of course, I've been a little busy, work, training, life, all kind of stuff's going on. And yes, I have some games I want to share with us today. I was at the Charm City Spring Action this past Sunday, March 17th, 2024, and it was a 5 round game in 25 minutes with 5 second delay. You know, delay is like an American thing. Everybody's doing increment, but America says no, we want to do delay. Okay, but that's okay. So it's game in 25 minutes, 5 second delay. So that means your move doesn't start to count after 5 seconds. So this tournament was held at the DoubleTree Hilton Hotel in Baltimore, Maryland. Yes, and I was looking forward to playing for. The main reason was because I've been doing a lot of blitz online. It's part of the training thing. Play as many games as possible. Check out the games. Learn the openings behind the game. Learn the theory. Just try to learn as much as you can. So I was looking forward to this event. I was trying to try out some of the things I've been doing lately. So yeah, it went well. I scored 4.5 out of 5 points, and of course I was the second seed in the tournament. So yeah, so let's get right into it. The first game I played was against Michael Gilbert. Michael Gilbert is an amazing guy. He lives in Baltimore. I've known him for so many years, probably since the year 2000. Uh, he's a great guy. Loves chess. He has a huge chess tattoo, I think, on his arm or somewhere. Loves chess. So I played him in the first round, and the game went like this. I had the white pieces: e4, c5, knight f3, a6. This is the second time I'm playing against this line. And the first line, I think I played a KIA against this line, and I really, even though I had a good position, but it's unlike what I would really like to do. But in this line, I decided to just face this opening head on, play the main line, and see what happens. Whatever happens, we must have to learn something. So here I went for the opening line d4. It captures on d4. I capture back with my knight. He develops his knight to f6, attacking my pawn on e4. Of course, knight c3. You want to develop a piece while you're protecting your pawn. He plays e5. Interesting. e5. E5 has the pluses and the minuses. The main plus, there is the tempo on my knight, so I have to move the knight away from the center square. The minus being that you have given up the d5 square forever. What do I mean by that? You don't have an e6 or a c6 that can stop any of my minor pieces, preferably my knight, from occupying the central outpost d5. You got to be careful if you're going to give up such huge square. You must have some compensation for it. If you don't have any compensation, you might as well be just busted and just don't know it. So after the move e5, I played knight d e2. This is what the natural response that came to me. And the idea was if he comes to bishop to b4. Now, I'm not so familiar with this opening, I have to say that. If it comes to b4, I'm just going to kick it, and if it captures, I capture back with the knight, still eyeing the d5 square. My bishop is going to go to g5, my bishop is going to go to c4, I'm going to castle, and then I'm just going to go to sleep. Why? Because my position is pretty much going to play itself. So after the move knight d e2, he plays bishop c5, putting pressure on my f2 immediately. Of course, that has to make me very uncomfortable. You can't be attacking my f2 and I just ignore it. If I ignore it long enough, I might get in trouble. So there's a bishop on c5 putting pressure on f2. A knight can come to g4 putting pressure on f2. A queen can go to b6 putting pressure on f2. And all of a sudden, this game is going to be about the f2 square. So if I don't do something about the f2 square, I'm going to get busted. So what did I do here? What did I do here? Knight to g3. Now, the idea of the knight g3 is, number one, to stop the knight from going to g4. And then if the queen has to come to b6 at some point, I will definitely figure out what to do. If I want to move my queen to d2 or move my queen to e2, I would have to come up with a move. So after the move knight g3, my opponent played queen c7. I really don't like that move because it doesn't really do anything to my position. You know, I'm not, no threat, nothing. So after the move queen c7, bless me, excuse me. After the move queen to c7, I play bishop to d3. What's the point of bishop to d3? I'm developing my piece and I'm about to castle. So, and if I castle, I end up having a rook on f1, defending the weak pawn on f2. So I'm happy about that. He plays h6, which is not a bad move. What's the idea of h6? It might be like a little waste of time, but it's pretty much stopping me from going to g5 to get rid of the knight so that I can build a castle on the square d5. So he played h6. I played queen to e2. Why did I play queen e2? You know, I'm always asking this question, why? You really have to know why you're making the moves you're making or the moves your opponent is making. Don't make a move because, you know, I want to move my queen to e2 because my feeling says just move the queen to e2. You got to play beyond your feelings. There's got to be a real why behind every move you make. So why did I move my queen to e2? Well, I'm just giving myself choices. What do you mean by that? Well, there's bishop to d2. I can either castle to the queen side or castle to the king side. So that's why I moved the queen to e2. So after the move queen to e2, my opponent castled. And now, you would expect me to just castle, but I said, nah. I said, you know what? This knight on f6 is really good. What do I mean by that? To black, of course. Defends the h7 square, keeps an eye on the d5 square. So instead of castling right away, I figured, let me get rid of this knight immediately. Because I don't want a situation whereby maybe I castle now, he plays d6, I attack the knight, he defends the knight. I can't get this knight off the square. So if I take, it takes back, bishop comes to e6, rook to c8, and it's looking good. I don't want that. So what did I do? Instead of castling, I just played knight h5 immediately. What's the point of knight h5? The idea of knight h5 is to make sure that this knight does not remain on f6. Because I'm trying to build a castle on the square d5. And this knight on f6 is disturbing me. So I need to get rid of this knight. So I play knight h5. He plays bishop to e7. Alright. Knight captures f6. Bishop captures f6. Knight d5. Here comes my castle. Knight to d5. He moves his queen to, he moves the queen to d8. Now at this point, right, I should pretty much just move my bishop to e3 and the game is pretty much over. But for some reasons, I just castled, you know. I was like, during the analysis, I was like, what are you thinking, man? Bishop to e3 just crushes the opponent. And it's so important that we don't miss such moves. You know, it happens all the time, you know. And that's the difference between us and the GMs. They don't miss such opportunities. So I think bishop e3 immediately was just winning for me. But I castled, and of course, he developed his knight to c6. Keeping an eye on the d4 square. I play c3. Why? To stop the knight from jumping to the d4 square. That you give me a square on d5 doesn't mean I should allow you. So, you know, it doesn't work like that. So he plays d6. Now I played bishop e3. And I think the reason I played the bishop e3, I think it's not just about the square, but the fact that I just need to develop my pieces. So I played bishop to e3. He played bishop to e6. And bishop to b6 immediately, putting pressure on the queen. And putting pressure on the queen and the c7 square, the b6 square. He has to do something. So he played queen d7. Now, queen d7, no more piece defending the knight and the bishop on f6. If I can give up my strong knight, I really like this knight on d5. Give up the knight for the bishop on f6. What am I gaining? Well, to start with, I'm exposing the king's position. And now my bishop can be very strong on this diagonal. The king is exposed. I mean, f4 is going to come. And the game is really going to look very bad for black. So, of course, I play knight f6. He captures back with the g-pawn. Queen h5. The threat is just to take on h7 and a lot of things are going to happen. After queen h5, king h7. Now, after the move king h7, I play bishop to h6. And I think at this point, my opponent resigned. Yes. So, this was my, well, did he resign prematurely? Not really, because this really king doesn't really, I don't think this king is going to have an opportunity of getting away. Because even if he brings his rook to h8, I have bishop takes h6. For example, if he brings his rook to, let's do this. If he brings the rook to h8, I have bishop takes h6, right? If bishop to g4, I have queen h4, right? So what am I threatening here? What if he brings his second rook here? Oh, that would be very bad. Because this, oh, sorry, what am I doing? Yeah, queen h4. Yeah, if he brings this rook here, it's going to be very bad because this bishop here is just going to be very, very bad for black. Well, he has a square here, so I can't really do that. Interesting. So let's see. Queen h4, king g8, f4, bishop to g4. I have queen h4, and then I'm really looking good because the king can't get away. You can't come back into the pin. I'm just trying to play f5, and this is hanging, and then mates is on g7. So after the move, I think after the move bishop e3, my opponent resigned. So that was the first game, and over to the second game. The second game I had the black pieces, and I was on the black side of a Sicilian defense, the Khan variation. So my opponent played e4, I played c5, he played knight f3, e6 was played, and then d4. What's the point of d4? Of course, you're trying to open up the position for your pieces, lay as much claim to the central squares as possible, because anytime you have a lot of control over the central squares, is always a plus for you. So c takes d4, knight takes d4. Then I play the move a6. Now, a6 pretty much means I am playing the Sicilian Khan. What if I'd move my knight to c6? Now, this is the Sicilian Taimanov. It's important we know the differences between these defenses because they are played different ways. You know, the way you play against the Khan is not the way you play on the Taimanov Sicilian, just like the Nashdov. But of course, this has nothing to do with the Nashdov. So in this position, I played a6. It plays c4. c4 is actually what we call the Marozzi setup. This is the Marozzi setup against the Sicilian Khan, right? After c4, what's the point of c4? It's pretty much trying to stop you from playing b5 or d5, which are free moves for black in such positions. So knight f6 was played, putting pressure on the pawn on e4. He played knight c3. Well, what happens if he plays e5? And I think I've mentioned this before in one of my videos. e5 loses immediately to queen check, pick up the pawn. But you're just a pawn down. But yeah, it's enough to lose the game. You don't want to lose any material if you don't have to. So knight c3 was played. Queen to c7, now stopping the advance of the pawn to e5, 1. And of course, the idea of b6, bishop to b7, putting more pressure on the e pawn. So queen to c7 was played. He plays a3. What's the point of a3? The idea of a3 is to stop the bishop from going to b4. Excuse me. Pinning the knight to the king. And of course, with the bishop on b4, the e4 pawn is under attack. So a3 stops that. And now black plays b6. What's the idea behind b6? The idea behind b6 is to get the bishop to b7 to put more pressure on the e4 pawn. not just about putting the pressure on the e4, but just a long diagonal. You know, in chess, you always want to get your pieces to the best squares as much as possible, because when you do that, good things always happen. So b6 was played. He plays bishop to e3. What's the point of bishop to e3? Defending the d4 square, vacating the c1 for the rook. So bishop b7 putting pressure on the e-pawn. f3 protecting the e-pawn. Knight c6, excuse me, sorry. Knight c6. What's the point of knight c6? You're developing your pieces, getting your pieces to good squares, as I said earlier. Knight c6 is possible with the idea of knight e5, knight g6, and then bishop d6 is coming, h5, h4. Very strong attacking possibilities for black. So after the move knight c6, bishop e2 was played. What's the idea of bishop to e2? You're developing your bishop, and then you trade into castle. Well, why not move the bishop to d3? If you move the bishop to d3, there is less protection on the knight on d4. You know, you always want to make sure you give yourself as much choices as possible. So here I play rook to c8. Actually, bishop e7 would have been the main line. But I play rook to c8. After rook to c8, he plays he castles. Now I played bishop to d6. What's the point of bishop to d6? Putting pressure on h2. Trying to take on h2 immediately. So what does he do? He plays g3. He says, you know what? If you want to take on h2, please. But this is a little dangerous because when you put your pawns on the same square with your opponent pieces, you know, there might be some trouble. You know, so of course I took the pawn immediately, which is what the engine suggested. After I checked the game, he takes back, queen takes check, king goes to h1. I play queen h3 check. No, sorry, I played knight g4. Now I think I missed this bishop to f4 in the game. I think that would have equalized for my opponent. But my opponent just say, you know what, since I'm already a piece up, I might as well take another one. I said, okay, that's fine. So I play queen h3 check, king goes to g1, queen takes on e3 check, king goes to g2, knight takes on d4. Now I have my pieces back with two extra pawns, with a very compromised position for black. What do I mean by that? You know, he has a bad bishop. Bishop is on e2, pawn on g4, pawn on e4, pawn on c4. Kind of block the bishop. And this just looks very strong for black. So he plays queen to d3, captures on d3, bishop captures back, knight to c6. What's the point of knight to c6? The idea is to come to e5 to put pressure on the g4, the d3, and the c4. And of course, like I said earlier, you always want to get your pieces to the best squares possible. So he plays b3. He defended one of the weaknesses. Then I hit on the other two. Knight to e5, attacking d3 and g4. He plays bishop to e2, defending that, but the c3 knight is undefended. So what do? b5, trying to exploit the undefended piece. You cannot capture on b5 because you're going to lose your knight on c3. So he plays rook to c1. I captured on c4. He played b4, trying to keep the position closed. He's down 3 pawns. Still has a bad bishop on e2. And I simply just moved my king to e7. What's the point? Connecting my rooks and trying to get all my pieces in the game, especially the rook on h8. So he played rook to e1. Because of the positioning of these pieces, I decided to play knight d3. The idea is if he takes, which is what he did, capture my pawn on c4. Now I'm threatening e2, winning the rook. So he has to attack the pawn. And then I play rook to c4. What's the idea of c4? Putting pressure on d3. But it's not just about getting a pawn, because my opponent has to be careful because of the pin on the e, on the c file, and also the fact that the rook on d1, if he captures on d3, is going to be a light square, which is the same thing with the king. So he did rook takes d3, and after that move, Bishop takes e4 check, and after knight takes e4, rook takes c1, and my opponent resigned. And these are the first two games that I played at the tournament, and I was happy with my play, although there were some mistakes, but those ones can always get corrected. All right, everybody, thank you for being here again. It's been a while. Check the video, give your comments about the video, and I will see you all soon. Bye for now.